All right. Hey, everybody. As she said, we only have 30 minutes tonight. And what I had said I would do with tonight is answer questions. Now, I did receive a couple of questions in email, which I can go to. But first, let me just see if there's anybody here in the sanctuary who already has a question. And if so, you know what to do, put up your little electronic hand. Lane, are you trying to put up your electronic hand? No? Yes, why don't you go ahead then? You had that look on your face like you were trying to put up your electronic hand. So go for it.
There it is. Okay. Hi. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about or ask you about the code.
Okay.
Code. I've been listening to the videos. Okay. And with conjunction with how the course says the script is written. And it doesn't seem to I guess what I'm trying to understand is everything set in stone, or how much control do we actually have over this thing?
I guess like the first half of your question, the second half of your question were two different questions.
Yeah.
So hold on one second. Let me write down the first half and the second half of your question so I don't get lost. One moment. I think I'm opening up my notes. Or maybe somebody could just put it in the chat for me. I'll tell you what to type. The first half of the question. See, I already forgot. This is how bad it is. You go again. Go again.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to get to ask you this question about the code. Okay. So I understand it's like
wait, is everything set in stone? Somebody type that in. That's part one.
Okay.
And then part two was how much control do we actually have?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like because I believe that the course is true in that it says the script is written. And but I also believe that it's some sort of a simulation, coming from the egoic mind.
Yeah. So let me answer the first half of your question, then the second half of your question, because it's really two different questions.
Okay.
The first half of your question is everything set in stone. The answer is no. That is a misunderstanding that a lot of course students get. But first of all, I'll tell you how I know, because I think that's important. I know because I learned it from within. The first time I learned what I call the code was actually in NTI Ephesians. This is where it came first. Later, it came as the flow. Later, it came as the code. It may have come in other ways too. But then after learning it from within myself, when I started studying other things like Buddhism, Sufism, Kabbalah, I kept finding the exact same thing I'd learned from within. So I know that this is truth, from that this is what people get from within. So that's important. So the truth is, what's set in stone is just a nanosecond. I don't know if you heard the teaching that I did, a few months ago about when I had the experience of the Big Bang. Mm-hmm. The Big Bang is like boom, 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 right? Constantly coming. Each one of those booms is set in stone, but that's like a nanosecond, right? And then what we always have is free will, but our free will is not what people imagine our free will to be. Our free will is how we will be with this current moment that's set in stone. So am I going to believe it? Am I going to panic? Am I going to accept it? Am I going to judge it? Am I, going to just watch it? Right? That we have a lot of options in that way, but our free will is not the nanosecond. It's set in stone. Our free will is how to be with that nanosecond. And then how we be with that nanosecond goes into writing the next nanosecond, right? So if I choose to panic, then the next nanosecond and the ones that follow are going to be written differently than if I'm just, watching with equanimity, right? So it's not, so it is set in stone, but only a nanosecond, right? I mean, so in that way, I would say it's not really that set in stone, right? Because I mean, those nanoseconds go by so fast, we don't even notice them. And so what's happening is we are in a dynamic relationship with creation. And it's constantly going on, and you can't take any one of us out of that, right? It's a constant dynamic relationship. Creation is always happening now, and it's kind of delivering now, and happening now, and delivering now. So that's the first part of your question. So are you okay with that answer? Okay, the second part of your question, you said, how much control do we actually have? And the answer to that is none. Because, you know, if we only look at the planet Earth, and you know, and I don't know that there is only the planet Earth. There could be lots of universes and lots of beings throughout all those universes. But if we only look at the planet Earth, what are we talking about? 7.5 billion eyes, you know, sets of eyes now. Every one of those sets of eyes are an equal part of that creation. So you have no control, right? You have no control, except for maybe only over your choice and perception. But as far as trying to make something go a certain way in manifestation, you have zero control. And in fact, thinking you have control and trying to control things in manifestation actually comes from the wrong mind. And so that adds wrong-minded energy to the boom, 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 to the creation. So the best thing to do is to realize you don't have control, to surrender all desire for control, to kind of copy Jesus, you know, thy will be done, and trust whatever is happening and be with it in an accepting and happy way. That's the best that you could, that is literally the best that you can do. That's the best you can do for yourself. It's the best you can do for the entire universe. That's the best energy you can put into the bang, boom, 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 boom. That answer your questions, okay?
Yes, that was beautiful, but I have a quick follow-up. Is that
Sure.
okay? All right, so when Jesus did pray in the New Testament, when he said, thy will be done, and the God of the Course isn't even aware of this world, right?
Oh yeah.
Because it's just the wrong-mindedness of miscreation of the ego.
Yeah.
Then who was he praying to, thy will be done?
He was just surrendering to what is going to be.
Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, he was giving up all control, all self-will, even the will to continue to live, to continue to exist. He was just giving up everything. It was his last shred of surrender. Whatever is going to be, let it be. I take myself out of it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Do we have another question in the sanctuary? All right. Oh, now I think I have your questions, Lena. Aren't yours the ones in email? Go ahead, Lena. I'll let you decide then. What do I do? Email? You want to re-ask your questions? How do you want to play this game?
Yes, then email. I will ask next time.
Okay, so let me go to your emails then. So the very first question, it's a quote from N.T.I. Matthew. Love God with your whole heart, with your whole soul, with your whole strength, and with your whole mind. That's from N.T.I. Matthew. She says, I have a humongous resistance from that and other similar sentences. I really want to get rid of my resistance. For me, it is understandable if I would be asked to love everything around me, including me. Dear Regina, please clarify, what am I supposed to love? Who is God? In my understanding, God is consciousness, God is we, God is universe, God is unmanifest and manifest. How can I love that immense concept? I want to read that again because this was perfect what she said. She said, in my understanding, God is consciousness, God is we, God is universe, God is unmanifested and manifested. How can I love that immense concept? So the simplest way to love God is to love this moment as it is. That's the answer to the question. In fact, there's a wonderful Bible verse. I believe it's in Psalms 118, but I could be wrong about that. But there's a wonderful Bible verse that says something like, I don't know, George, maybe you may be able to quote it better than me if you're around. Something like, this is the day the Lord hath made, and we shall rejoice in it. Right? That's it, I think. I think I pulled it out of my pea brain. That's the best way to love everything. Just what's ever here right now as it is. And in fact, you know, your question was interesting. You said, how do I love such an immense concept? You don't want to love a concept. You want to love what is. Do you hear the difference?
Yes.
So you just love whatever's in front of you. You love whatever is happening in your life. That's what you practice. And to me, one of the best teachers of loving everything is Michael Langford. In his book, The Most Direct Means to Eternal Bliss, or he has a newer one, The Direct Means to Eternal Bliss. He teaches something called the Loving All Method. It's wonderful, wonderful teaching, just the best I've seen on this topic. But one of the things he says is, if there's something that's presented in front of you that you can't love, then see if you can accept it. You know, maybe you can't love it, but you can say, but I accept it. And if you can't accept it, see if you can emotionally allow it, right? Emotionally allow it. That means allow, just, you know, kind of opening to it instead of closing to it. And that really works, because we all find that we can't necessarily love sometimes what's right in front of us, right?
Mhm.
So to be able to back up to acceptance, back up to emotionally allow, and then start there. Eventually, what happens is the love is the only thing that makes sense. That happens by itself. It gets to where not loving doesn't make sense anymore. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
And so the Loving All method really, really works on us if we choose to practice it. I recommend practicing it as thoroughly as you can. So if you don't have Michael's book, The Direct Means to Eternal Bliss, I recommend getting it and studying the chapter on the Loving All method. I recommend reading it probably, he says, at least twice. I think I would say at least 30 times. Because every time you'll notice something else that your resistance didn't let you see the first time.
Perfect.
So does that answer that email okay?
Prof. Battery Liz, thank you so much.
All right, let me look at your second email. In number 170 of your early teachings, which is the one called The Mind-Blowing Truth, you said that the ego is sharing one illusion and gave an example of a cup. How about the water which is in the cup? Is the water also an illusion? Then nature, ocean, forests, animals are also an illusion. How about a poor in spirit? You were saying that as an example, an alcoholic who is living in a constant conflict with everyone is the reality. I am still not really clear about it. I understood that everything without awareness is the reality. So basically what that is talking about is what I call the first principle of God. It could also be seen as the second principle of God, but ultimately it's really the first principle of God. The answer is that everything we see is one thing, one essence, which is what I call the first principle of God. It's also called God. It's called the absolute, it's called the Father, it's called heaven, it's, called the Tao, it's called all kinds of things. What it isn't really is what it appears to be. So for example, these appear to be glasses, and that's okay because they're very practical. They help me to see. These appear to be glasses, but the glasses are actually made up of God. The chair you sit in is actually made up of God. Your body is actually made up of God. Everything I can see is actually made up of God. In fact, one example I like to use is, I just thought of another good example. But one example that I like to use is like if you have a Play-Doh and then you make like an entire city out of Play-Doh. You make buildings, you make trees, you make people, you make animals, you make stores, you make cars, you just make all this stuff out of Play-Doh. You still only have Play-Doh, right? People may point at it and say, that's a dog, that's a building. But if you know how to look, it's still all Play-Doh. Right now I'm going through the Ramana Maharshi MPP course with Anne Blanchard. And in that course, Major Chadwick, who was a devotee of Ramana Maharshi's, he is raised in a Christian tradition. He's a Westerner. He's raised in a Christian tradition, and he's contemplating God and he's contemplating creation. And what's really interesting is it kind of occurs to him as an insight. Wait a minute. If all you have is God, and then God begins to create, if God was all there was, God had to create out of God because there was nothing else. You see, there was nothing else to work with. There was just God. So everything has to be made out of God. And so the reason it's called an illusion, the definition of an illusion is something that either is misinterpreted or could be misinterpreted by the senses, by the body's eyes, nose, right? Taste, touch, smell, all that kind of stuff. So the reason it's called an illusion is because it's actually God, but the senses misinterpret it as glasses and log and blouse and body, but it's all God, you see? So it's not that it's not that it isn't, it is. Illusion doesn't mean it isn't. Illusion just means it's something other than it appears to be.
Cool.
Does that help?
Oh, yes, tremendously.
Good. So I think that's both the questions you sent an email then.
Yes, and how's about natural disasters?
Yeah, same. Believe it or not, same. It's all God. Yeah, when I had the experience of being the apple, have you heard about that experience?
Yes.
Okay, when I had the experience of being the apple and I saw only light, and remember when I was the apple, my daughter took a bite out of me.
Yes.
And my experience was light interacting with light, right? One of the things that I realized after that is that, cutting, not that I'm encouraging anyone to cut off anyone's arm, but cutting off an arm is the same thing as the daughter taking a bite out of an apple. Like everything is just God interacting with God. That's the only thing that can actually happen here. But we don't see it that way because we believe ourselves to be bodies. And so we're seeing through separation. And so we see all of these horrible things going on and good things going on. Duality is good and bad. But what's actually the only thing that's actually going on is God interacting with God. And that's still the only thing going on in a natural disaster. That's still the only thing going on in a war, because that's the only thing that's actually here. But you don't want to fake it about that. What you want to do when you see something that's upsetting to you is you want to turn to the basic practices, right? The basic practices. It's through the basic practices that your vision starts to change, and then you start seeing these things differently. So your job isn't really, believe it or not, to know that horrible scene over there is God interacting with God. That would be purely intellectual at this point. Your job when you see that scene over there is to realize that this is causing you some kind of pain, some kind of suffering, and to, maybe start with resting, accepting, and trusting until the emotion passes, and then go in and inquire, why was this upsetting to me? And find the core belief in your mind that you need to give your willingness to let go. You do the basic practices and let the vision change by itself. Don't try and understand the vision. You can't get there. You can't get there from here just by trying to jump there. You have to go through the basic practices, which are letting go of false beliefs, and get you to the point where your vision starts to change in a genuine way. And when it does, you'll know what you're looking at.
It's great. Thank you. One thing is keep me in all that things. It's a physical pain. For example, I'm working in your way, what you're saying, and before, I completely understand that I'm not body. I completely do not afraid to die. If I will die tomorrow, I will be today and say you goodbye, guys, and be love. And at least I think, at least I believe that I will be happy. But one thing is, and I understand what you said, and I'm working on it. I think it's beautiful. One thing, physical pain. This catastrophe include physical immense pain. For example, war is also include physical pain. I have one fear of, I'm a woman, and if I will be at some place alone, would that just afraid of physical immense pain is scaring to me. It's my only fear. What can you suggest?
I understand, because actually, believe it or not, I had the fear of suffering too. And for me, the fear of suffering was greater than the fear of death.
Yes,
so I
yes.
understand. In fact, I wished death on people who were suffering, or animals who were suffering, because I thought death was better than suffering. What happened was I got an illness, which really was great suffering. It came with great pain. And when I was in that illness, I asked for help. I called out to Jesus, please help me. And what happened was, during the course of that week, I was able to see that what I believed in my mind was that the spiritual stuff is nice. The spiritual stuff is fun to talk about. It's helpful to study. It's helpful to practice. But I didn't believe it was the absolute truth. I thought the one thing that was the absolute truth was suffering, that you could pretend all the spiritual stuff as long as you want, but when you start to suffer, that's where you know what reality is. Like, suffering was reality, not the spiritual stuff. When that belief was uncovered in my mind, some point after that, it was actually healed. And the reason I know it's healed is because I have had accidents. I've had serious accidents that caused great physical pain, and yet at the same time, there was no suffering. The connection between emotion and pain was severed. And what we don't realize is we think that pain causes suffering, but it's not true. What causes suffering is all of our thoughts, all of our resistance, all of our interpretation of the pain. And when that goes away, pain can still be present, even great pain, and yet our experience is joy. And I know this for a fact because this is my experience, and it has been for years. So it's kind of like the Buddhists say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. However, once again, that was a belief that was healed in my mind through the basic practices. You see, we can't understand truth. You cannot conquer it with the intellectual mind. You have to go through the basic practices and let the miracles happen to you. Miracles being a change in perception. You go through the basic practices, and let the miracles happen to you. And as you start to have these same experiences, then you see what the masters have always said is true, because now it's your experience. But to try and understand it with the mind is actually a waste of time. It gets you nowhere. Maybe just enough trust in what the masters say that you then will commit to the basic practices, right? You need enough trust in what the masters say to commit to the basic practices. But you can't understand, for example, how can there be great pain and no suffering? That cannot be understood until it's experienced. It can't be understood. All right. So again, just commit to the basic practices as consistently as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We only have 4 minutes left. Is there a quickie?
I have a quick question, if nobody has.
Okay, let's make it
I
a quick.
recently just accidentally was on one website and seen that Elon Musk is enlightened, and it's the website awaken.com. What is your thought? Is really he's enlightened? You can look, it's awareness.com. I was kind of really surprised.
You know, it's funny because if you were to go through my 7 Steps journal, which was just published as Out of the Stillness, over and over and over again in that journal, you will see where my inner wisdom is telling me, forget about trying to gauge whether someone else is enlightened or not. That is a distraction. Focus on yourself. So that's the answer I'm going to give. I mean, over and over, my inner guidance just told me, forget about that. Forget about it. Because I was doing the same thing. I was trying to figure out who was enlightened, who was enlightened, who wasn't enlightened. I was looking at their behavior. Are they consistent? You know, doing all this stuff and deciding who I thought was and who I thought wasn't. The only thing inner guidance said about that is stop doing that. Forget about that. Stop doing that. So that's going to be my answer. So thanks. That was a quick, that was easy.
Okay,
All right, then I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Sinix. I'm sure she has an announcement or two to make, and then it can get to Jacqueline. Jacqueline, I know you want me to sit here and listen to you, but my mama wants me to take her to Deer Print Wine because last night Emily was saying, you remember we got busted the other night? You remember that? Emily was saying every time she walks in there, all her customers are there.
Aww.
That's what she told me and Mama. So Mama told her that we would come there tonight. So that's where I have to go. But I will definitely, yeah, I will. I will definitely be watching you on YouTube. So I will be there, just not live. Okay.
All right. Hey to Mama. Hey to Emily.
All right. I love you. Bye.
Love you. Bye.